Hello everybody, Mannix here. Got another knife review for you. This one's going to be on the Cold Steel Holdout 1. They also have the Cold Steel Holdout 2, which has a 4-inch blade, and then they have the Holdout 3, which has a 3-inch blade. This is on the Big Daddy, which has a 6-inch. This one happens to be in plain edge, but you can also get these fully serrated. There is no combo edge as I'm filming this right now, not that I care. Very cool, simple knife. Extremely huge, simple design. Doesn't matter what size you get. It's the same exact design pretty much. It's just squished down depending on how big it is. It's just so cool. I love Cold Steel. Let me try to get rid of that smudge here. I love pretty much all of their designs. I've tried almost all of them over the years anyway. This is one of the designs that I've seen over and over again, but I never pulled the trigger on it. It just didn't interest me enough. I was more into the Raja, the Espada, like these designs that have more pronounced features on them, more pronounced shapes. This is very symmetrical, very simple. But once I got this in hand anyway, I fell in love. I absolutely love it despite it being so simple. It's just extremely effective and I love it. Absolutely love this knife. It's really cool. I'll get right into the review. Specs. Weighs 7 ounces according to their website. That's pretty light for the size you're getting right here. Handle length is 7 3/16 inches. The blade length, 6 inches on the nose, making the overall length 13 3/16 inches. So it's just under 14, just above 13. It's a pretty long knife. It's actually a very, very, very long knife. Retails at $254.99. S35VN blade steel on there. Insane. Satin finish on this one. Full flat ground. Thank you very much. I like all those things. Dual thumb studs right here. I mean, it's lopsided, but you can swap it to the other side. Tip up carry only. Pocket clip is swappable to the left side, making this a fully ambidextrous knife. Another thing, by the way, Triad Lock, which also is ambidextrous. Also one of the strongest locking mechanisms in the world. Despite being a lockback, the knife is still lightning fast as far as deployment is concerned. You do need a little bit of wrist movement. You're not going to be able to get it out on its own. Just a little wrist flick. So for a 6-inch blade, that's a very impressive speed. Extremely strong. I do not see this thing failing on you. They have the lock bar kind of high riding. Some of them are more like in the middle. Some are really low. This one's high. I assume that's just so your hand's not in the way to accidentally disengage it. But even if you climb all the way up here, you can squeeze as hard as you can. This thing's just not going to disengage on you simply by its design. So what can I say about this in comparison to the other big Cold Steels? And again, a lot of the things I'm going to say here also are going to apply to the 4-inch and the 3-inch. It's the same exact design, so if this is too big for you, but you want like a medium, larger size folder, get the 4-inch if you really like this one. If you want a small EDC blade that can still work in tactical situations, get the 3-inch version. You can't go wrong with any of them. I just happen to like the big ones because I like big blades. I like the big boys. I just think they're cool. Say it's a drop point on their website. It looks more like a spear point to me, but I think it's just closer to the drop point. I think it has to be completely symmetrical to be a spear point, but whatever. Call it drop or spear. Either way, it's going to be very good at piercing. It has a decent amount of belly right there. Not a whole lot, but it's there. So decent blade. It's very versatile. The handle, this screams versatility, this whole knife right here. In my videos, I talk about versatility, and then I talk about extreme designs. A versatile design is one that's not exactly great at anything in particular, but it's good across the board. Any situation you want to throw it in, any task, any defensive situation, any utility situation, it's going to work. An extreme design has a lot more choils and cutouts, and it's more crooked, or there's more lines to it, whatever you want to call it. It excels, absolutely excels at specific tasks, but it's not great at all of them. It's bad at some things, good at other things. This is a versatile design. Doesn't get much more versatile than this. The knife's almost completely symmetrical. It's comfortable enough. It's not uncomfortable, but it's not like, oh man, the ergonomics are so good. All there's big old choils in there. My fingers can really get in there. Nah, not really, but it's comfortable enough. It's good enough. It's not uncomfortable is my point. There's nothing I severely dislike about this knife compared to the other big Cold Steels or the other Cold Steel designs in general. It's very versatile, very, very, probably their most simple design as far as their big guys are concerned. Again, 6-inch blade, that's absolutely massive. Let me discuss the ergos on here. So the main standard grip, I'm going to say, has this little choil, although it looks really small. It's actually surprisingly comfortable. It works pretty well. Thumb goes right on the spine right here. It lines up with these 3 choils. That's their jimping. Thick, wide jimping cutouts versus the typical sharp jimping you see. It's actually effective enough. It doesn't look like much, but it actually works. Your thumb kind of locks into specific spots right there. There's even more on the blade up here. As you can see, it mimics the same shape. There is some sharp cutouts on the G10. By the way, G10 handle right here, no steel liners, which gives it its lightweightness. It's lightweightness, is that a word? Whatever. It's lightweight because it does not have any steel liners in there, and you can see the cutouts in the handle. It's very beautiful, very simple. Lightens it up, makes it very aerodynamic, very balanced, extremely balanced knife too. It doesn't feel blade or handle heavy. It's very light, very balanced. That's kind of the purpose behind this guy. It's a fighting knife. It's not just a defense knife like a lot of the Colts are. It's a fighter. That's what I kind of like about it. It's very simple, very aerodynamic and light. You can swing it around, thrust with it, slash with it very easily. No, it doesn't have an accelerated cut like, let's say, the Raja has, or something that has like a kukri. But you can bring the spine, or you can bring the knife back up after doing a cut without worrying about weight weighing it down. Again, we're going with a versatile design rather than an extreme design here, if that makes any sense. But anyway, this jimping on the bottom actually works really well. It's really sharp. It really locks my thumb in there. I'm surprised more knives with G10 don't do this. Just this pattern right here is literally just a very sharp pattern. They don't have it up here. I mean, maybe it's because it's more expensive to cut into the lock bar because it's a tempered steel. I don't know what their reasoning for that is. Cold Steel does this all the time, but it works enough. It's okay. Not that I matter that much. Not that it matters that much, because I wouldn't hold it in this position generally anyway, unless I'm really trying to do shaving or precise work. Generally speaking, I do the standard grip, which is right here. So standard grip, I'm going to call this the more precision grip, where your thumb is on the very end of the spine of the blade right here. Index finger locks into the jimping right there. I still don't like to thrust cut with anything like this without any big choils in the way, because I'm afraid my finger is going to slip and it's going to slice open my hand. It's going to hurt like hell. I'm not interested in doing, I wouldn't trust a thrust cut with this shape. I would like a guard. There's no guard in the way, so be careful. I would not thrust in that position. That would be, it just makes me cringe, like how, because the inside of your hand, that's really sensitive. Ow, that cut me. It'll heal over time, but goddamn, I don't even want to try that. So I would not recommend it. But for this position, for shaving work or anything, you know, if you had to use this for a smaller task, I don't know why you do this. This is the only knife on you. Sure, it's good for that. So again, all three of the designs have this right here. So it works very well. But again, it'd be down here. The choil works good enough. The choil right there is really meant to expose the thumb stud, which works really well. Opens up every single time. It's fast. It's so fun to play with this knife. Again, so simple, but I love how lightweight and balanced it is. That's what makes it stand out from the other big cold steels. It's an advantage it has over them. It brings something else to the table. Really cool. So it's comfortable enough. It's pretty slim. It's about the same slimness of the Cold Steel Recon 1, if you're familiar with that one. For another reference, this is going to be just a little bit slimmer than, say, the Spyderco Tenacious line of knives. It's just a little bit slimmer. Instead of G10 and stainless steel liners, we have G10 and no liners. So it's going to be a little slimmer, a little bit easier to EDC. I prefer thicker handles, honestly. I like having more to hold on to. Like, let's see what I got here. I got Cold Steel Luzin. That's FRN handles, or Grivex, whatever they call that, with the liners in there. A lot more to hold on to, a lot more hand filling, more to grip onto. It feels like it's more meant to be used. We have nice guards there too. But it won't carry as well. It takes up more space in your pocket, and with such a big knife, you kind of don't want as much space being taken up in your pocket, do you? So that's another thing I like about this. It's very easy to carry despite being such a long blade. It's not very thick. That's cool. I like this FRN backspacer we have in here with the cutouts. It's really cool. It doesn't do anything as far as like texture goes, because the tip or the surface of your thumb slides across the surface of the G10 right there. So it's aesthetic though. It's cool. I love backspacers in knives. Really awesome. So that's pretty much it as far as the shape goes. The G10's really grippy, like they put on a lot of their knives. Any of their knives that have G10 handle scales typically have a very coarse sandpapery grip, which I absolutely love. Really gives you a lot of traction right there. Really cool. So despite not having choils and such, you do have some traction to work with here, at least on the sides of the handle. That's cool. And if I were in a defensive or fighting situation of some kind, I'd grip as low as I can while getting a full grip with all four of my fingers. I wouldn't want to go down here. I see some people do this in videos, like when they hold onto the cold steels, they have their pinky freely sitting there. I wouldn't do that. It feels like it could get knocked out of my hand if I'm not careful. I'll scooch up, just, yeah, there we go. Now I'm really, really locked into place. Like that. I don't see this falling out of my hand very easily. Again, despite not having any major choils or any pronounced design of any kind, it still feels locked in enough. Again, we have a very versatile balanced, lightweight fighting knife here. That's what this is meant to be, and that's what it excels at. Really cool. The main calling for this guy is to be a defensive, tactical, martial, whatever you want to call it, blade. A lot of the cold steels, like, again, the Raja and the Espada, they look like they'd be good for, also great defense knives for sure, but also they look like they'd be good tools for the garden. They'd be good for hacking through foliage in the woods or the jungle or something for whatever reason. If you were doing that, absolutely, you can do it with those things. This one, not as, you can, but it's not meant to excel at that. That's not the point. This one actually is meant to be a fighting knife. That's how I see it. That's my opinion on this guy. That's what's so cool about this one. It's flat out just like a martial blade. This is something a martial artist would have. It would be something like this. Again, I love that lightweight factor it has. And sometimes you want weight in knives a little bit. Yeah, like the Cold Steel Spartan. That's another big, heavy knife where weight can help you, again, accelerate chopping and slashing motions and for rougher work like that. But when you're talking fighting, typically all that really matters is going to be the edge right there. When it comes to a knife and you're defending yourself with a knife, fighting with a knife, whatever it is, you just want a sharp edge and you don't want it to fail on you. You don't want it to disengage. You don't really need weight. You actually kind of want it to be as light as possible because you won't get as fatigued as quickly, technically speaking. And you can actually bring the knife back up to go in for another swing. You can thrust it easier without tiring yourself out as easily. It's more maneuverable. So there's a lot of advantages to that. And again, this G10 right here is going to be strong enough. No, it's not as strong as having the steel liners in there, but they're just not really necessary for a knife like this. Believe it or not. G10's really strong. Really, really dense, solid material right there. It's it's hella strong, actually. And its skeletonized, too, so it's lightened up and even more maneuverable. Pocket lip works great. Very simple design. Doesn't look awesome or anything, but it works just fine. Perfect tension on this. It's not too tight, not too loose. It's on the tighter side. I'd rather have a pocket clip too tight than too loose, for sure. I'd rather have it fall out of my pocket accidentally, but decent amount poking out of your pocket right there. Not too much, not too little. It's not like way down here. That'd be kind of cool if they actually made some cutouts like down here as well, if they wanted it. Like if you wanted to swap the position of the pocket clip, let's say you wanted more to grip onto, that'd be kind of cool actually, but currently it's not. Currently they just have this one spot right here, which is good enough. I've never had a single problem pulling this out of my pocket. In fact, these cutouts right here actually make a nice little lock for your thumb to depress into as you are pulling it out. In my pocket, thumb automatically lands right here, grab onto here, yank it out. Some pocket clips that are a little bit high up, especially with bigger knives, you kind of slip a little bit, like the Cold Steel Spartan. That one's cool and all, but it's such a big, heavy knife. They have the pocket clip so high up on the handle. Sometimes it accidentally snags on my pocket. It's just, I like having just a little bit more to grip onto, and just by this knife's design alone, I have no issues pulling it out of my pocket, despite being so huge. Just whip it out, flick it into place. Naturally, my index finger kind of lands on this ring right here, which also kind of helps it lock into place. That's also cool. So for certain tasks, you can also do that. It's not the best or anything, but for pulling out of the pocket and engaging the knife, it's just a little bit of something for you to grip onto right there, which is kind of cool. Big old stopping right there. You should be familiar with the Triad Lock right now, but it's kind of ignorant for me to say that because what if this is the first knife review you've ever watched? I can't just assume you know what the Triad Lock is. So let me break it down. Very simply, it's a lockback, which is a very simple locking mechanism, but we have an integral stop pin in there, which gets in the way of both the tang, or it's behind the tang of the blade and at the very butt end, or the front end, I should say, of the lockback. Long story short, it's a very, very effing strong locking mechanism. Stronger than almost any other locking mechanism for a folding knife out there on the market, period. Right next to the Ramsafe lock, the Balisong, and the Paratrooper style knife. There might be one other that's almost as strong as it or right in the realm there, but it's easily one of the top strongest locking mechanisms that's self-actuating in the world. Period. No arguments there. Thumb stud's great. I love the cylindrical design they use on a lot of their knives. Very simple, works every single time. It's not shaped like a cone. It's not hard to get to. It's not too coarse. Thumb gets in there every time. No issues with the thumb stud. So cool. If you make your thumb studs wrong, you got to really be. How could you possibly mess up your thumb stud if you're a knife company and you design a knife with a bad thumb stud? I've seen them before. I know it's crazy, but it exists. Kind of reminds me of the Cold Steel tie light right here. I like how the reflection of the satin finish in the blade pokes through the hole. It's just elegant. Very simple elegance right here. So cool. Such a simple design. There's not a whole lot to it. It's very simple, very symmetrical, but you know what? It's so versatile and so effective and so elegant all at once. I'm a huge fan. It's one of my favorite Cold Steels now for being so simple. It's just so well executed, so balanced, so light, so fluent, so strong. There's nothing I can really think of that I really dislike about this knife. Now, let's talk about the blade steel. S35VN is the current steel they're putting on these knives as I am making this video. But it went through some changes, and this model I have in particular is actually the original holdout. If you look very closely there, to the trained eye, you will know that this is not S35VN. This one happens to have AUS 8A, which is a softer, more medium grade blade steel. S35VN is a very high quality blade steel. This one's a little bit cheaper. But since this model is no longer being made, the price on these, believe it or not, has actually gone up a lot. Like a lot. They're a lot more expensive now. They're about the same price as the new ones with the better blade steel, the S35VN. I believe there was a CTS XHP version on these when Cold Steel switched some of their steels out back in 2015, 2016, somewhere around there. But modern day, these days, they are using S35VN, which is another upgrade, which makes them even more expensive. You can get these all day long for, oh man, I want to say, oh wow, I can't remember now. I think it's like $130, $120, $130, something like that. I'll annotate it in right there what the current market price is. It changes if you're watching this video 5 years from now and it's different. And sorry, don't shoot the messenger. But ordinarily, I say that's kind of expensive for what you're getting right here. It's literally just G10. We have the blade right here and the hardware. There's no liners or anything. There's no like exaggerated cutouts or elaborate design patterns here or anything that would increase the cost. It's so simple. So you'd be like, okay, well, that's kind of a lot. Well, you're getting a big old slab of S35VN, which is not a cheap blade steel, to put it mildly. So you are getting your money's worth, I say. I kind of miss when Cold Steel put the AOS 8A. Oop, wow, speaking of spear points, I just pierced right through my mat right there. Yeah, it's poking through the orange mat down there. Oh well, it's covered up. There we go. I kind of miss the days when Cold Steel used the AUS 8A, believe it or not. Most people will completely disagree with me. They're like, oh, what's wrong with you? You like the cheap, crappy steel? Yeah, I kind of like that cheap, crappy steel. I like how it kept the costs down, especially with a big knife like this. How often are you going to use this for utility tasks? Probably not very often compared to your more utility-friendly knives, your smaller, more medium-sized ones. S35VN retains a great edge. It's a great blade steel. That's actually an amazing blade steel. It's way up there. It's a very high tier, very expensive. But for a knife like this, for a fighter, how often are you fighting and hacking up zombies and hacking up criminals who are trying to kill you? Like, it's just not very often, I'd imagine. You're not going to be using it for that very often, so why would you need an edge that will retain itself for that long to the point that you don't want to resharpen it too much? I don't know. You know, that's the problem I have with the more expensive blade steels. For a knife this style, I prefer the cheaper steels because you can keep the costs down, because most likely most of you aren't going to be using it to the point that you'd actually notice the difference there. That's just my opinion. But that's one of the things I like about the Raja, Cold Steel Raja 2. That one's got an AUS 10A blade steel on there, much, much cheaper. And guess what? The knife, cheapest I've seen it was for $70. It's about the same exact length as this guy right here. $70 for the Raja 2. 70. Insanity. Because the blade steel's so cheap. But you take something like this, which has less material on it overall, and it's almost double the price because it's just a more expensive blade steel on here. But hey, I'm not going to argue. Some people do like that. Some people like having the more expensive blade steel. It's cooler. And you know, a lot of people are buying these knives because they're cool. They like that in their collection. They like having a cool, valuable knife in there that's very capable and has a very high quality steel on it. So as far as coolness goes, I can't disagree with that. You know, S35VN is a great blade steel. I just wish they had an option to have a cheaper blade steel maybe. Give it a slightly different look. Give it a slightly different pattern on the blade. Maybe a different finish to kind of help indicate what blade steel you have on it. Because some people do want the more affordable knives. I like knives that are sub $100, even at this size. It is possible. We've seen it. Cold Steel Voyagers XLs, the Cold Steel Raja 2, like I just said right there. Back in the day when they used the AOS 8A blade steel on all their knives, they were significantly cheaper. But, hey, I guess I got enough complaints. A lot of people are like, AOS 8A, not for me. Realistically, look at your knives. What are you going to use that size knife for? Then tell me whether you want that blade steel or not. So I do like it. I did like it when they kept the blade steels cheaper like they did on this one, like the one I'm holding right now. But these days, that's just currently where it is. So more expensive. You do get what you're paid for. They're not too expensive. My point is, I think it's just redundant having such a good blade steel for a knife this size. But hey, if you like it, you like it. I'm not going to argue with it. Absolutely an upgrade. It is a better blade steel overall. So cool. One more thing I do want to note here. It's kind of weird. I don't like how they do this on the edge. See what's wrong there? I see it as a problem. So there's a choil right here in the blade. Usually the choil represents where the cutting edge is going to start and where the ricasso of the blade ends. The ricasso being the portion of the blade that is above the end of the handle before the edge starts, in between the cutting edge and the top of the handle. So that's what that choil is there for me, but it's weird how even then the edge doesn't actually start until maybe like a 1/12 of an inch after the choil is there. Why they did that, I don't know. Cold Steel, can you explain to me why you did it? That's kind of weird. I'd think the edge would start right after the choil, but yeah, weird. They didn't get that wrong with the Tough Light, another Cold Steel. They actually put the choil in there, and the edge actually starts right after the choil. Don't know why they did that for this knife, but it's not a big deal. Overall, really cool martial fighting blade. Again, Cold Steel is notorious for its defensive blades, defensive options. This seems more like an offensive blade to me. That's what makes this one stand out to me. Absolutely can be used for defensive situations, for sure. And no, I'm not saying I condone being offensive with your knife. Let's just say a bunch of criminals are after you, and they're all trying to kill you, and you got to get them first. That's what this guy's going to be good for, right here. As long as you're being law-abiding and it is justified, I don't see what's wrong with that. So anyway, that is it. That is the Cold Steel Holdout 1. Again, just about everything I said here applies to the Holdout 2, the Holdout 3. Yeah, those knives, I can forgive having the S35VN on there because you're going to be using your knives more often with smaller edges, I think. So, but hey, it's still cool. One of my favorite knives from Cold Steel now. Holdout 1.